Hello everybody, welcome back to OMB Reviews. I am the critic who is a cynic. Hope you're doing well, and today we're doing a box office breakdown for this past weekend, which saw Superman, to no one's surprise, once again take the #1 spot, dropping only 54% from its opening weekend. For those wondering, that is a very strong hold for a movie of this kind. Typically, when you have big tentpole movies like this with massive fan bases that love to see things opening weekend right when the film comes out to avoid spoilers and all that jazz, you see a very front-loaded opening weekend, and then you see some pretty steep drop-offs from the second weekend on going forward. That's not really what we're seeing here. We are not seeing the best drop-offs that we've ever seen before in any comic book movie or anything like that, but we are still seeing very strong numbers nonetheless. Again, a 54% hold from a previous week, after that previous week was a pretty strong one, right? Opening up to around $125 million domestic, continuing to make money, pretty good money, in fact, over the course of the week, and now adding another $57.2 million. Again, not as high as what some people had been anticipating, but also still very, very strong nonetheless, bringing its total domestic to $235 million. But the real story, once again, when it comes to Superman, are those international numbers, which did not come out once again to play for the film. And so we'll talk about what exactly is going on with Superman now that we have the first 2 weeks out there. We can make some projections on what this film will most likely do. And in the end, it will be probably good for itself as far as its own individual profitability is concerned. But in the grand scheme of things, when you're comparing this to other movies, whether that be Matt Reeves' The Batman, whether that be other Superman movies, including the infamous Zack Snyder Man of Steel and others, let's just say this film is not really set to really change any minds or really push anything forward, right? Not really pushing the envelope in any real way as far as actual ticket sales are concerned, because even whether you adjust for inflation or not, based on the current projections, this movie is not likely to beat the numbers of Man of Steel or The Batman. And that also could be with or without inflation being accounted for. And I think that that should say a lot about where the current state of not just comic movies are, but really the DCU, whatever it is that they're calling it these days, and also really more so what the state of movie theaters are in general, right? This is something that we've really seen an issue with over the past several years, right? COVID was a big part of this, but we also know that, hey, the movies that are being put out there in theaters are not driving people to the cinema in the same exact way. Every now and then, you'll get a film like Superman, you'll get a film like Guardians of the Galaxy Volume 3, you'll get a film like Deadpool and Wolverine that's able to drive out more than your typical audience to a film. But we're still not getting anywhere close, especially with films like Superman, to the numbers that we had seen in previous years. And really what it comes down to is, I think, a sense of apathy, not for the superhero genre, not for the DCEU necessarily. I think there's definitely part of that in there, but really just for mediocre filmmaking in general. And if you look at the online discourse about this movie, let's just say you have toxic people all over the place, because if you criticize even the smallest ounce of this movie, you are immediately labeled a hater, you're immediately labeled a grifter, all kinds of names are thrown your way. When the reality is, hey, guess what? Maybe it's just a mediocre movie that some people love and some people don't. And in the end, that's okay, because no matter what I think or you think, at the end of the day, it is a film that has objective flaws like all films do. The question is, did you have fun with the film or not? Objective reality versus subjective feeling. And I think some people are allowing their subjective feelings to influence their thoughts on the actual movie itself. But we'll get further into that at another point. Let's just go ahead and dive right into the weekend numbers here. So again, Superman coming out the #1 spot, 54% hold from the previous week. Very, very good numbers there. We'll do a further dive on that as we go over the course of this video. We have also Jurassic World Rebirth continuing to hold well. What's crazy about Jurassic World Rebirth, right? This is also a film I am not a fan of. I think this is a pretty bogus movie at the end of the day. The fact remains, though, audiences are seemingly gobbling it up. Whether it be the domestic or international, it is doing strong in both. This is a movie that we honestly thought would probably see some pretty bad or middling numbers here in the States and then have some really impressive numbers overseas, because these films tend to, right, the whole Jurassic World IP tends to have been a much more international property. But what's the most interesting to me is how much better it's doing domestically than I think anyone would have thought possible. The fact that it's still, in the third weekend of release, only dropping 42%. That's a very, very good hold this far out from its opening weekend because of the kind of movie it is, and also because of the way that it's been received, right? This film has received a lot of criticism, and a lot of legitimate criticism to boot, but it's also very clear that the audiences that support these movies that have pushed every Jurassic World film over $1 billion, I think this will be the first one that will not be able to get there, but again, we'll go further into that as we go further into the numbers. I do think that it is still worth noting how impressive it is that the film is doing as well as it is domestically and internationally, right? This is something that Superman is not doing, right? Again, this is not me trying to, pounce on Superman. It's just trying to state a box office fact, right? Just what the numbers are pointing out here, right? When it comes to Superman's box office, you can see it is very skewed towards the domestic, right? It's not anywhere close. You almost have double the audience domestically going to see this movie than internationally. You almost never see that happen with most movie releases that have a global presence or have a global box office that is able to drive it to, upwards of $800 plus million at overall box offices. And so that's why $1 billion is basically nowhere near the possibilities of what this movie can do. And it has nothing to do with whether or not you think the film is good or not. It just has to do with mathematics, and it has to do with probability. And based on the current trends and based off of the current amount of money it's making, and especially that split between domestic and international, it's not going to have enough of that international audience that is so needed by most movies to push those films to the stratosphere as far as total box office is concerned. And even though bottom line, it's actually going to be probably better for the better that it gets the most of its money from domestic, because it gets more return on its investment, which means it's able to pay off those numbers much faster than if they are relying on those international audiences. Comes down to the fact that, again, studios only get 55% of the domestic box office and around 40% of the international box office. That's why it's better to do well domestically than internationally. It does still, again, go into that total overall box office that it's seeing at the global level. That's why Jurassic World Rebirth is getting to the point where it could potentially get upwards of $900 plus million. And again, I don't think $1 billion is going to happen for this movie, but the fact that it's even on the sense of possibility after its massive opening weekend, globally speaking, I think, again, shows you this is a brand that is doing well, both domestically and internationally. I think Superman right now is tracking well enough to where it'll probably surpass that of Jurassic World Rebirth pretty easily. But the thing and place where Jurassic World Rebirth is going to easily defeat Superman is going to be in those international numbers. And again, that is, I think, going to ultimately make the reason as to why I think Rebirth is going to end with a much higher box office overall than the entire box office of Superman. We also have a couple of new film releases this weekend, which nobody really saw. So I Know What You Did Last Summer. That's right, the continuation of a franchise I had no idea was even still going. Made only $13 million domestically. Not really a whole lot there. I think it made a little over $20 million globally. We'll go into the official chart in a second, right? But just to give you an idea of this, the film itself didn't cost all that much money. I think it was around an $18 million budget. And so on paper, it seems like this film is probably doing the best out of the films that have been released. The fact still remains, yeah, no one's really interested in this franchise anymore, right? When you talk about the horror genre in general, those tend to do very, very well and very, very good numbers. I don't know exactly what they were thinking with trying to continue the story, but hey, $13 million, I suppose, is not the worst that could have happened for it. What is pretty bad, though, is Paramount Pictures' Smurfs. That's right, there's a new animated Smurfs movie, so they've gotten rid of the live action animation combination stories and just gone straight with a classic animation style. They only spent about $58 million on this film, so pretty small budget-wise, especially for an animated movie. But then the marketing for this film has basically been non-existent. Most people didn't even know this movie was coming out. I think that most people, myself included, when we saw Smurfs on the docket, we said, oh, is this like a re-release? Is this like a re-release of the live action adaptations? And oh, no, it's just actually a completely new movie. Only made $11 million here domestically. So even though the budget's not as high as it could be, right, $58 million is pretty good for an animated feature these days. That is still way too high for what the money is being brought in so far for this movie. Yeah, not a good look. Smurfs not likely to make that money back, at least not theatrically. F1 still holding around at 26%. Again, this film has been holding well in the week-to-week. The issue, of course, is that its opening weekend was on the low side, and so you're still holding from a very low starting point, and it also is doing much better internationally than domestically, and that is, again, going to hurt the bottom line of the film. We've mentioned before about how this is a joint partnership with Warner Brothers, taking on distribution here. Apple TV will get the exclusive premium streaming rights for the movie, but it's still ultimately going to be kind of the situations where maybe it makes its money back because of the licensing fees that Warner Brothers is paying to Apple. Apple put in the budget for this movie. Again, there's a lot of things going on behind the scenes, and so theatrically, it's not going to make its money back, but as far as total profitability down the line because of other revenue streams or because of the deals made between distributors and producers of movies, you could still end up seeing that being a good day for both Warner Brothers and Apple. And also Apple being a trillion-dollar company doesn't really care all that much about losing too much money, especially if it drives more people to their platform. And again, I think that overall it's a good enough movie where it might move the needle somewhat. But again, I'm always going to be honest with you guys and say, hey, on the paper, the money's not there. That does not necessarily mean, though, that it's not going to be made up at some point. How to Train Your Dragon is still holding well, and the only reason why I'm mentioning the number 5 and 6 movies because I have to in order to get to the number 7 film, which is another new release this week from A24. This is an Ari Aster. I think I'm saying his name correctly. He did Midsummer and all these other weird movies that I just do not like at all. I think he's vastly overhyped and overrated. Eddington, which only made $4.2 million, which again sounds about right for an A24 release. This movie, however, had like a $25 million budget. So, right now, not set to make any of its money back based on the current numbers as they are standing. Let's go into the international worldwide releases for all these movies. And so, as you can see, this is just, again, what the problem is for Superman, right? Look at these numbers here. $235 million domestic. That is really good. That is darn good for this film. Not just for this movie, but also for the film of having its kind of a budget, right? This is a film that, again, depending on who you ask, it costs $225 for its budget. For others, it's $255. For others, it's north of $300 million. Again, for me, I still have a hard time believing that they would lie on a public tax form and that you would just be allowed to say, oh yeah, just make up a number. Just ballpark a number, and whatever the number is, that's what your tax refund is going to be based off of, and it's all going to be good. It's like, no, if you say $360 million is your budget, I imagine you have to be pretty close. I mean, I imagine there's some leeway there, right? I imagine there's some percentage leeway in those kinds of filings, but you can't tell me that, oh, no, they said 365, but in reality it was only 255. I'm sorry, but that seems a bit ridiculous to me. Just on the surface of it. If not, then, you know what, I think someone probably should get sued at this point, right? If that is the indeed public tax filing, and that was the only tax filing that was the basis of them getting the money from the state of Ohio. I believe that was the state that was filed in. But even with all that being said, right, $235 million domestic, but look at the international. This is a situation where the domestic is almost double that of the international numbers. That is almost unheard of, right? Most movies don't do that. Most global releases, especially, will have a slightly higher or even significantly higher international take, and that is usually what will push films past the certain points, right? Even films that do well here domestically, it's those international audiences that bring you to that billion-dollar point, that close to $1 billion point. And that's the reason why we can say and look at these numbers and look and ultimately say, yeah, Superman, it's not going to do it. Right, it's going to be setting some pretty good numbers here domestically. I think $300+ million is definitely on the table for this movie. I think some people have said $300 to $350 million domestic by the end of its run. Again, I think that's definitely on the table. But internationally, I mean, we're talking about it maybe capping itself $250 million. And again, on paper, that sounds good, but when you are making that much more money domestically, that does have an overall massive impact on what your total box office is going to be. So for anyone who was holding out hope that this film would make $1 billion and just shove it in everyone's faces, that's not going to happen. For those hoping that this movie would make so much more money than Man of Steel, adjusted or unadjusted for inflation, or The Batman, I'm sorry, but based on these numbers, that is not likely to happen. And again, we'll go into projections in a second, and it's still possible, but that international, I think, is going to be the thing that keeps back this movie from getting to the heights that some people might hope it to be because they honestly believe that it deserves it. Again, for me, I don't think it really deserves to be at that level, but there are many people who do, and I'm just here to try to keep things honest, to try to shoot straight with you guys and tell you exactly what I think is going to happen based on history, based on what the numbers are actually telling us, not on what we hope would actually happen. Going over to Jurassic World Rebirth, as you can see, $647 million. Again, this is a number that is just not going to happen for Superman. $337 million, $371 million internationally, but $276 million domestic, right? This domestic number is actually a lot higher than I think a lot of us thought it was going to be. It's still nowhere close to international, but this is what your typical split is. That's the reason why this movie is going to easily get to $800 to $900+ million at the global box office, because it has that balance between those two markets. If you don't have that balance going on, you're not going to get that total box office hype going forward. I know what you did last summer at $24.6 million. Smurfs at $36 million globally. F1 now at $460 million. Again, better than anyone could have expected. But again, massive budget here for this movie is really holding the film back from making any, net profits while it's in theaters. How to Train Your Dragon, $588 million. Again, it's pretty much done as far as its full release is concerned. It'll make a little bit more, might have a chance of getting $600 million when everything is said and done, but this was a film that was never going to hit $1 billion after its opening weekend, and we are pretty much seeing this film fall exactly where we thought it was going to be. Eddington at only $4.2 million. Apparently there's some commentary in here about COVID and masks and stuff, but it also goes off the rails as only an Ari Aster movie can do, so yeah, no real interest in that one for me. Elio performing much better than expected. However, it's still the worst, or one of the worst performing Disney animated films of all time, Pixar films of all time, at only $129 million. Right? Many of us thought this film would maybe not even have a chance to get to $100 million. It's been, again, legging out better than expected, but you can still kind of see, I'm sorry, there's just nothing here going on for this movie. All right, let's go to the charts, because we love charts here on OMB Reviews, and talk a little bit more about, again, what I am seeing as far as what the chances of Superman making certain amounts of money is actually going to be and what that looks like. So first off, based off a $400 million 2-week opening, right? So when you have 2 full weekends adding up to $400 million, here's on average what most films fall into as far as their range. Okay, there's some films that can do better than this number. There's some films that can do worse than this, right? It's a range here about what most films on average tend to do after their first 2 weeks. So we're projecting that the film, in a worst case scenario, worse as far as the average is concerned, is going to be around $572 million globally by the end of its run, with a best case scenario of being only around $800 million. Now, if it hits that best case scenario in this average, that would be very good. The problem is that while it's holding very strongly here domestically and making a lot of money here domestically, it's not doing that internationally. Some might try and say, but yeah, it only dropped 54% internationally, or it only dropped by X amount internationally, and that's really good. The issue is that you're still dropping from a very low starting point. You can't only look at the drops, right? You can't just say, hey, it only dropped 30% from week 1 to week 2. If it's dropping 30% from one of the lowest numbers for that kind of a movie, then guess what? That's going to hurt its bottom line. It can only ever make so much money when your starting point is as low as it is. This is one of the reasons why you look to a film like Elio. Yeah, Elio's holding strong, but because its starting point was so low, there's no way it's going to be able to reach the levels that it would need to, 1, to break even, but 2, to actually vastly exceed any expectations that people may have actually had for it. Right? That starting point does matter quite a bit. Your opening weekend total does matter quite a bit. And the fact is, Superman's opening international was very disappointing. It was a very bad number. And continuing now into this week, now that you still have a domestic almost double that of the international, that is not a good place to be. And that's why your numbers are going to be rather limited. So $800 million is a best case scenario. That's assuming that it doubles what it's made so far at the box office. And again, is that going to happen? Maybe domestically. Internationally, I don't think so. And that's why it'll probably end up somewhere between 572 and 687. Again, I think $700 million is definitely on the table for this movie. I don't think it's going to get anywhere close to $800 million, though, by the end of its run. Now, of course, there's a lot of debate over the budget. And again, I don't see how you could argue that it only cost $225 or that it cost $180 million. Again, you would have to be saying that someone lied on tax form. Again, that just kind of don't quite understand how you get there. But even if you give it the most generous interpretation, basically, you're talking about a movie that right now is set to either lose a very small amount of money or make a decent amount of money compared to its overall budget. So basically, it's in a very good position. So as far as break even is concerned, Superman is in a very good position to do that. And I think that it probably will be able to break even, make some of its money back, make some profits. And again, that's a good place for you to be. Now, I think that they probably would have wanted this movie to be a massive hit, a massive financial success, a lot of return on investment, and maybe they'll be able to have some analytics about, okay, how is this movie paving it forward, going forward, right? How is this going to actually help us make more money down the line, even though we may not make a lot of money up front? That very well could be a part of the calculations that they are making, spinning whatever successes that they want to make. All I can do is say, hey, here are the numbers that have been given to us. Here are the numbers as they are being reported. Here are the numbers as they seem to be. And as of right now, it's looking like this film will not be the biggest as far as net profits are concerned, but break even, profit, yeah, it's going to be able to hit that based on the current metrics that they're going on. Now, of course, if we were to find out the film costs as much as $360 million, costs more than that, again, I think that we're probably looking at $255 to $300 million as far as net spend on budget, and that's not including marketing costs. And if that is indeed the case, again, what we're seeing here is, again, losing a very small amount of money, or making upwards of, again, this says $100 million, but we know this is actually using an older metric here. So we're probably looking at probably $50 to $75 million in net profit as being a very likely average territory. And again, that's still profit. You're still making it. You're not making your budget back, though. You're not paying, the next movie going forward. You do want to have a lot better than just making your money back and making a little bit of profit. And it might be able to say that it can do that with streaming and Blu-ray sales and 4K sales because, again, they have a very passionate fan base that's going to definitely be able to drive up those overall profits. But, again, theatrically, it's just not going to happen. Now, here's the issue, right? What we have here is a situation where if we're talking about an average of 687, guess what? That would mean that even when you don't adjust for inflation, that would be barely beating Man of Steel. That would be well below where the Batman finished. And that's the reason why I think these metrics matter. Because, again, profitability is important. And I think this film is going to be able to do that. It's going to be able to make its money back and be profitable. However, as far as where this stands in the history of DC movies, as far as where it stands, as far as just, again, the historical significance of box office and box office success, for the people that are just really, I think, in a very negative way, praising this movie to a fault, meaning that they are just praising the film so much that it's almost as if they are treating this film as an idol. It is their golden goose that for some reason, if anyone says anything negative about it or criticizes in any way, they immediately go crazy and they immediately go into attack mode. I've seen way too many people, including people that I know, who have just been acting in a very just unhinged way when it comes to this film and defending this movie. I think that really what it comes down to is, okay, you have to start to then look around and face the reality that the film financially is not looking to be as successful as you think it is. You might think this film is the next coming. You might think this film is the best thing you've ever seen and your joy has been restored and everything. And again, you can feel all of those things, but the box office is not reflecting that. Now, this does not mean, if you make money at the box office that you're a good movie, or that if you don't make money at the box office, that means that you're a bad movie. But what it does mean is that your hype of this movie is not matching reality, and hopefully that can give you an idea as to why I do think sites like CriticList are much more, I think, in the actual know of what people are saying and thinking about the movie than your Rotten Tomatoes, right? Based on Rotten Tomatoes, the fact that you have high critics, high audience scores, these numbers should be so much higher. These numbers should be so much higher internationally, especially. But you're not seeing that. And so what that tells us is that, hey, a lot of people are enjoying this movie. It's making money. And again, it's going to be one of the biggest box offices of this year. But it ain't going to get to $1 billion. It's not going to come anywhere close to that. And it's very likely going to lose to even unadjusted numbers for Man of Steel or The Batman, let alone not having any chance to match the adjusted numbers for both of those movies, and let alone ticket sales for both of those movies. So I think it's, again, just important to kind of step back and say, okay, maybe I should step back and realize that not everyone loves this movie, even though I might think that is the case, even though my bubble might say most people are enjoying this movie. And maybe I should start looking at these numbers and realizing, yeah, you know what? Maybe there's something more going on here. Again, just a thought. Going next into Eddington, again, $4.2 million here because of a $25 million budget. This film's currently $35 million in the red. Probably not going to make much of that back, but again, A24 is going to do what A24 does. Smurfs opened at $36 million globally, so very, very little number here domestically, but $25 million internationally. And so, yeah, even at a $58 million budget, this film's not going to make any money back. And then I Know What You Did Last Summer, in the best case financially, making $24.6 million globally off of an $18 million budget, currently at $15.2 million in the red. So again, this is a film that might be able to hit that break-even point at some point. I don't think it's going to hold very well personally based on the things that I've been hearing about the film. I think on CriticList it has a decent score, and I think that's probably where it's going to stay in the minds of most people. But yeah, fascinating times that we live in this regard. Now let's just go to a couple other films here for a second. So first, you have F1, the movie, at $460 million. Again, this film, based on its budget, is still about $168 million in the red. So as I said, it's not going to be able to make that much back financially as far as the theatrical release is concerned. But hey, they might have had a deal with Warner Brothers. Speaking of Apple, who pay for the film, right? They might have had a distribution deal with Warner Brothers that gave them some money back and might be able to cut into those potential losses. You had a lot of individual producers that were on the film too, that may have put up their own money into the funding of this movie too. So again, that could also end up alleviating some of those costs as well. And so that's why, again, a bit of a mixed bag here when it comes to F1. Megan 2.0, as we all know, is a flop. Obviously, they didn't spend a whole lot of money on it, so it's not the biggest flop in the world, but just nothing compared to the first film. Again, flop in comparison, especially to that last one. 28 years later, this film should have been so much better, but still not making money back. Elio, again, look at the percentage here. It is doing very well down the line. Again, much better. This is kind of doing what we saw other films like Elemental do down the line. The issue is Elemental was able to get to like $400 million or so globally. And this movie's not going to get anywhere close to that, right? $129 million is nothing. So it just tells us that they've clearly lost quite a bit as far as their sway at the box office. And it's not all that surprising. $580 million reported for How to Train Your Dragon. Only about $42 million in net profits. Again, not the most profitable movie in the world, actually. Now, of course, Epic Universe being tied in, it's going to make money in other revenue streams. But still, interesting that it's not the biggest box office that one would think for this year. And let me see any other ones here. Ballerina, still really not much to say there. Again, these films are pretty much done. Mission Impossible Final Reckoning, around $580 million. Again, pretty much what we thought that was going to be. Lilo & Stitch finally hit $1 billion officially. There was some controversy about that last week, and yeah, it finally hit that number. TheNumbers.com decided to, again, forego its usual ways of updating things and updated that on Thursday of last week to bump it up to $1 billion. And just go ahead and look at this number here, right? It's barely different from what it added onto that Wednesday. Just goes to show you that they literally changed their entire way of updating numbers just to help that film cross $1 billion on that day, when they could have just waited until today to do that same exact thing. And again, just drives me crazy what the numbers has done recently. And that's basically it as far as films and releases. Again, some people had asked in the comment section to look into some of those movies. Hopefully I've covered that. But these are the numbers as they stand. So what are y'all's thoughts? Again, when it comes to Superman, we obviously have Tony over here at Deadline. Let's see if we have the updated. $57 million second weekend propels Warner Brothers to top of year-to-date studio market share with $1.32 billion. Again, he loves to throw in things to paint whatever narrative he wants to. But again, the fact is that, yeah, domestically, this film is doing great. This film is rocking the domestic. It's going to be one of the highest domestics of the year, I would say. Total box office, international box office, oh boy. This film is still struggling. You don't make double the international box office, right? You don't make double in your domestic market share unless you're struggling with your worldwide grip. And I think that this is showing us quite a bit as far as, hey, maybe this film isn't as popular as some of the biggest defenders of the film are trying to argue. But hey, let me know your thoughts on this and anything else I mentioned in the comment section down below. How much do you think it's going to make? Again, based on where it's currently tracking, I think $700 million sounds about right to me. Again, that's with a higher domestic total share, but a lower international share. You have Fantastic Four coming out this week, and so that's going to take away some of those premium format screens. It's also going to impact international because we all know MCU, even though it has not done well internationally as of late, hey, it's still going to be somewhat competition, and competition tends to impact international much more than domestic share in the box office, especially nowadays. But hey, any of your thoughts on those things and anything else I mentioned, let me know in the comment section down below. If you like this video, make sure you smash that like button. Also, make sure you smash the rumble button as well. You guys are all amazing and beautiful people. Have a wonderful rest of your day, a blessed Sunday. And as always, God bless. And now for a huge special shout out to all of my Chosen of Valhalla members, starting off first with my people on Patreon, Father Luca Illick and Miss Modern Muses. Check out her YouTube channel by the same name, Miss Modern Muses. Also to my Subscribe Star people, Matt317. Check out his Twitch channel by the same name, Matt317. And lastly to my YouTube member, Mr. Roy. Shout out to you, good sir. And if you want your name shouted out at the end of every live stream and video, check out the top link in the video description below where you get access to that. Also, you get access to a plethora of other things. You get your name listed at the end of every live stream and video, like you saw in those names that came up before this video started. And also access to a giveaways channel that I host over on the Discord server where I give away 4Ks, Steelbooks, Blu-rays, all kinds of stuff. So check that out if you're interested in that. Also, I have an exclusive podcast that I hold at least once a month, and it's always a good time, and you get extra bonus content with that also. So if any of that sounds interesting, again, check out that top link in the video description below. You guys are all amazing, and beautiful people. Have a wonderful rest of your day, and as always, God bless.